This is Della Show, and you're listening to DisArmed at the Armory Club in San Francisco.
Hey, boys, my man Curtis sure came through for us this time, did he, man? I'm annihilated, you know?
Astronauts, humanoids, and otherworldly creatures all around the galaxy and elsewhere. I am here tonight with myself, Della Show, and Bonobo the Clown. And we've also got a very special guest tonight, the San Francisco Bay bon vivant extraordinaire, Mr. Paul Nathan. How you doing, Paul? Boom. So
Did you say bon vivant or bon vivant?
I said bon vivant.
I think it's, vivant.
Bon vivant. It's French.
Yeah, it means
vivantiousness.
boom. Yeah.
Boom. Good boom.
So on our last episode we had
Cat
Robichaux, and we ended up talking a lot about Paul Nathan. So I thought, well, you know what?
Get out of here,
why
Cat.
don't we go straight to the horse's mouth?
What you really thought is I don't have anyone for tonight. You called me today.
Called out. So anyways, we are.
Well,
here
you were later in the cycle, to be honest with you. In terms of our schedule.
That's true. It's really tough to book these things. We've got a bunch of people that, I don't know how doing scheduling for, 4 or 5 people or like in a band, like what you do, Bo.
Yes.
It doesn't, I can't imagine how you can get
with
anyone,
adults in particular. Right?
Yeah.
It's
and I didn't think it would
alarming.
now that this is happening, though, because we did have Cat on last time, I like this. Makes sense. Mm-hmm. The flow.
Because now Paul can.
Well, I'm wearing a Cat Robichaux t-shirt. I'm wearing a Misfit Cabaret t-shirt. It looks good. It clings to the flesh in a delicious
it does
and
really cling to the
sensual
flesh.
way.
If you at home could see that. So I wanted to talk with.
Do we do photos of this?
We do photos of this. Yeah.
You should get a picture of this
We will
t-shirt.
get a picture of that.
Because I bet your fans will want one.
We're definitely going to get pictures of it all. Where do we start? I'm on the way up driving over here. I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to, as I was telling Paul earlier before the show, I feel like I've known Paul so long, 20 plus years now, that I could probably answer any question about him way more,
Where was Paul Nathan born?
Bakersfield.
No.
San Francisco.
You almost failed on that one.
I thought you were born in Bakersfield.
No, I was born here. I'm a 5th generation San Franciscan.
You lived in Bakersfield.
I did live in Bakersfield, but
So
No.
Let's go straight to biopic.
I want to ask you some questions first. What does Paul Nathan do for a living?
What does Paul Nathan do for a living?
What does Paul Nathan do for a living?
I'm asking you.
Who's asking?
Well, I've heard that he's a bad boy magician, I think, is what I hear around town. I know that he produces a lot of shows. I know that he's had his hands in all kinds of cookie jars in terms of...
I'm a cookie jar handing motherfucker is what I am.
San Francisco underground
Yes, he
stuff.
is.
And so that's what makes him really the perfect candidate for this show.
Plus the new beard.
You like the beard?
I love the beard.
Yeah, the beard's nice.
It's not really new,
What's
He's been
your
rocking that for
when
a
you
while.
look at that, what do you think of first? Or have you guys already talked about this earlier?
No.
Okay, what do you think of?
Some sort of like 17th century German mythological creature.
Close.
From like Goethe or something.
Nice.
That's kind of what I've always...
So a year ago, a client of mine calls me up and says, hey, we want to do this historical thing. We've got a photograph of this guy. He was a Scottish sea captain who had moved out here and he had become an architect.
A Scottish sea captain.
And here's the photo. And we looked at it. We thought, this looks like you. And I looked at it and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take the money. He doesn't look anything like me. So I shaved my beard to look like this Scottish sea captain, who it turns out was neither Scottish nor a sea captain, but he did have this badass beard.
I do see the Scottish kind of get me hands and that type of flavor.
That's right, lad.
Yeah.
He's not Scottish.
But he's not Scottish, and he's not a
The
sea
whole
captain.
thing fell apart.
Well, yeah.
The beard stuck, though. It looks
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it softens me. I was rocking this Mr. Clean look for a long time, and I looked mean. And I'm not a mean guy, but people think that I am. But I do have a kind of a mean sense of humor, and
This
so
does soften you. You're right.
it softens me. It makes me more approachable, easier to lure the children into the band.
And that's what we wanted to expose tonight is this is a phrase that you
Children
love a
in
lot.
bands.
No, the
Oh.
soft underbelly.
Soft underbelly.
Yeah, isn't that kind of one of your things?
I've never underbelly.
Soft underbelly.
Not necessarily soft.
I don't know.
You can use my term. I'm happy to part ways with half of it.
Let's go back to basics. Let's be a little chronological here because we got a lot to unpack.
We do have a lot.
with
There's
this
a lot
creature.
going on this,
It's a big specimen.
I think it's going to be a
and
two-parter.
It could be a two-parter.
I might have to come back.
Love to have you back. But let's start with.
sequel.
Well, let's see how this goes first.
Let's
this might
start-
be horrible.
It could be. Let's go back.
It's not starting off very good so far.
Let's go back in time to
Okay.
when you first came to San. And I'm not talking about you were born here. So you were raised here until you were like what, 7 or 8,
I think we left here when I was 10,
and you moved to Bakersfield.
Reno, Nevada.
Oh, see, I didn't even
Same
know
thing.
that.
Yeah, I lived in Reno for about a year and a half, and then we moved to a little farm village in Illinois called Sycamore, Illinois. I lived in Sycamore for about 6 years, and then we moved to, one day my parents just came home. We got good news and bad news.
What, is this military?
No, my father worked for
Transition?
the phone company. My father had been in the military, and then he worked at the dew point, or the dew line up in Alaska. You know, when during the 50s, 60s, when they were worried about the Russians launching nuclear missiles, it was called the dew line. It was a bunch of radar stations up in Alaska that would watch for nuclear missiles coming over the top. And my dad he sat, because of his expertise that he had cleaned in the military, he got this gig up there in Alaska, and he would just sit in this box for 12 hours a day looking at this, spinning little arm on our, with old style radar
telling.
system, just going bloop, bloop, waiting for the Russians to launch.
Waiting for
their
one bear
Is
to go.
the due, the missiles are due in, or what's due? Is it DEW? What's due?
I don't know that. That's a good question. I never asked him. My father's passed away, so I can't ask him now.
In other words, is it an acronym or is that something short?
I don't
or-
know. I don't know. I was.
Thank you for clarifying.
I was
Thank you.
I was young at the time. Anyway, he did that for a little while. Then he came back to San Francisco. I mean, we were already born by then, and he came back to San Francisco, and he started working on top of Bernal Heights. You know, that big weird spaceship-looking thing on top of Bernal Heights. That's a microwave station. My dad was an expert in microwaves, and so he
we're
worked there.
talking early 60s?
That was 67, 68, and then
Okay.
one day, he just decided that San Francisco was getting a little too crazy for the kids. San Francisco was a small town.
I hear there was a lot of hippies around that time.
There was hippies, there was crazies, there was, the Zodiac Killer, there was the Black Panthers,
Yeah.
there was the Symbian Liberation Army with, Sharon Tate. There was, all kinds of crazy going
Jim
on.
Jones was just fermenting.
Jim Jones had...
That was later, 70s.
Yeah, that happened, I think, just after we moved. So they were like, we're done, and they moved to Reno, and then we moved to this little town in Illinois. I lived in Illinois, then we moved back to Cali, but it was Bakersfield.
Right.
And graduated high school there, and then I joined the Army, and did 2 years crawling around in the jungles of Honduras.
Chasing Sandinistas.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Not so much Sandinistas as...
Plate-sized tarantulas.
Yeah,
The
pretty
best
much.
part of this phase of Paul's life that always stuck with me, which I do know, is this is where he learned to halo jump, which is an acronym for high altitude,
altitude.
low open.
Yes.
More learned what the word meant.
Oh, you didn't actually do it?
No, God, no, it's shit's scary.
Yeah, it's high risk.
Yeah.
Very high risk.
So let's skip to you find some magic hat out behind the barn behind your parents' house, and all of a sudden worlds are revealed to you, and you look at it and you start playing with a wand, and you think, I might just be able to fathom cut out some sort of existence with this wheelhouse.
Yeah, so I think I was 6 years old when I saw a magician on TV called Shimada. My mom was a librarian here in San Francisco. She comes home with an armload of books on magic. And she wouldn't let me read any of the books about tricks or how to do tricks until I had read this one book, which was a compendium of biographies about magicians. So I had to read all these magicians' life stories.
Biographies.
Yeah. And then I was allowed to read about the tricks. And so, that was a couple of weeks, and then she came home with an armload of books on, submarines
do you think that
or whatever.
Was so that she could, it was an effort to kind of colorize their life and not make them mythological to you, and kind of give you a realistic prerogative on magicians?
No, she was just mean.
Oh, she's just mean.
Yeah.
That's not true. I've met her. Probably the
You don't know
nicest.
that you didn't live with her? You grew up with her.
I lived with her.
She was
He grew up with
she
her.
wanted she wanted me to
me.
learn to be able to follow my dreams, and she wanted me to learn to read.
Yeah.
She did for all the kids, and so it was a Herculean effort on her part. But my mother, every time I was bored or I was I'd finished whatever reading I had done, and I was looking for my mom always had the exact right book at the exact right time. She handed me The Hobbit, but she didn't hand it to me too young or too old. She handed it to me just right. And I knew that she, there were books that she was saving until I got older.
She really was methodical about
She was
this.
very methodical. She was...
That's funny, because when I met her later in life, it seemed like this whole road that you'd gone down was completely serendipitous to her.
This is not what she would have chosen.
What would she have chosen?
Doctor, lawyer, something that makes money.
It's crazy how routine those two answers are for our parents' generation.
Yeah.
I got the same thing. My brother got the same thing. You probably got the same thing.
I never got it.
You
No.
did a bunch of acid up front
No,
that kind of
yeah, they were
threw you a bit.
pretty like, if you can just survive and find food, Aaron, that's a
Yeah,
success
they set the
in this
bar
world.
because they
High
had to
for you,
deal
didn't
with
they?
it through high school.
And I barely jumped it, by the way.
Good
Yeah.
job.
So you're in Bakersfield. You're in high school. I'm kind of surmising you're learning
I'm doing magic tricks for on the weekends for like birthday parties and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Then I joined the Army and get out of the Army, and I've got I joined the Army specifically to have money for college, because I had done a year of college before that.
So it was the sort of a GI plan.
And what I realized is I'm too single-minded, I'm too focused on stuff. It was very challenging for me to have a job and do college. I could do one or the other.
Job being magician.
No, job being a job, like
Jobby job.
jobby job, so I get paid the bills.
Yeah.
And so I joined the Army specifically to pay for my college, and I came back with enough money to pay for school. But then I got this offer to be a magician at this pizza parlor. And so they offered me, $50 a night or something, which was a lot of money back then, to work for 2 hours a night, just on Friday and Saturday night, just walking around, plus I got tips.
Yeah.
And I did that for a year, 8 months, a year, something like that. And then I got this call for a gig down in Los Angeles to work at a nightclub down there for New Year's Eve. I go down there, but by now I've got all these chops from doing restaurant magic all this time.
Yeah.
And I go down there, and they liked me and I liked them, and so it turns out this was not just New Year's Eve, it was the opening night of this new nightclub. And the nightclub ends up being really successful, and it's LA, so
What was the nightclub?
It was called Vertigo.
Oh, this is Vertigo.
Yeah, so it was the
Okay.
Studio 54 of the West Coast. And so for the next 3.5 years,
This is where you
I was the
shined
house
your
magician.
chops.
Yeah, and I was performing for Eddie Murphy and Lionel Richie and Princess Stephanie and Michael J. Fox and the Sultan of Brunei and Prince, and all these people would come in. And I didn't watch TV. I was culturally pretty illiterate, so I wouldn't know who any of these people were, so I would just walk up to them and be like, "Hey, magic trick," and they liked that, and so I got along really well with them, and ended up getting to be friends with like Woody Harrelson, or friends is a big word. I get to be acquainted with like Woody Harrelson.
Sure.
We go play softball and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You played softball with Woody?
Yeah, I did. I was terrible.
Was he terrible?
No, he was good. I was terrible.
I'm assuming this is during the Cheers years.
Yeah, it was just post Cheers.
Yeah.
He had just left.
Because they had a softball team.
Cheers had a softball team?
Pretty sure they did.
Did they?
Yeah.
They were
Well,
from
this was-
Boston.
Bar,
They
they
must have. Yeah.
Well, this was Michael. So I knew Michael Wolper, whose dad was the
Yes.
guy that produced the Olympics.
Wolper from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Wolper?
Is that who produced Willy
A.
Wonka?
Wolper did.
Maybe. So anyway, this kid, Michael Wolper, he was the son of some other Wolper. I think the other guy, the older one, was Michael Wolper too. I'm not sure. Anyway, so this kid, he had just signed like a 12 a 12-picture deal, 12 TV deal with Fox.
Wow.
And so he's looking for stuff. And he comes into Vertigo and he just sees me doing magic, and he just, I don't know, he took a liking to me. He starts booking me for, like all these different people's birthday parties.
I never knew this.
Yeah, and so, and then he says, I want you to come out, play softball with us, and then do magic. And I'm like, I'm a terrible softball player. He's like, well, just play the softball. And I'm like, okay, I'll play the softball, but I'm terrible.
Right.
And at the end of it, he pulls me aside and he paid me, and he was like, you are terrible at softball, but you're a great magician. I love you, man.
Where'd the ball go?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's where I met Woody Harrelson. Was playing softball with him and losing terribly, and then we got to be acquainted. I'm not going to say friends. We got to be acquainted, and I got to be acquainted with lots of people. Eddie Murphy used to go to his house and party.
You mean Charlie Murphy?
No, Eddie Murphy.
No, I know his brother,
Wolpert.
Charlie Murphy.
Charlie Wolpert.
I met Charlie at his house. I didn't even know his name. What happened was my friend and I were doing. I brought a friend of mine. He did magic too, and he's performing. And he comes up to me after. He's like, I just performed. He looks so different than what I thought.
You talking about
like,
Eddie or Charlie?
My friend had performed for Charlie.
This is Charlie, but you thought it was Eddie.
I didn't think it was Eddie. He thought it was Eddie.
Oh, gotcha.
And I'm like, dude, that's his brother. So anyway, yeah.
Darkness.
Met a lot of cool people. I met.
Sean
what's his
Penn.
name? No.
Tell me some story about Sean Penn.
Barry
that was
Manilow.
A little bit earthy.
Oh no, what was his
We
name?
can get into that later.
The singer.
Al Jarreau?
No, but you're close.
Liberace.
No. I'll tell you the story later because it's a great story, but I don't remember it now.
Can I interrupt?
Please.
2 things. One,
Yeah.
distant early warning line, DEW.
Now, what is that, right now?
Going back to
that's
in
what it stands
Alaska,
for?
that's where your dad was
Distant
hanging out.
early warning line.
Distant
Oh,
early
that's the
warning
acronym.
line.
Yeah.
Never heard of that.
Gotcha.
I love it. The DEW line.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's also the OO line, EW
Yeah.
only. I like DEW.
It was when I grew up. It was called the DEW line.
DEW
That's what my dad referred to
Sounds
it as.
better. OO
Yeah.
line.
Yeah, he
Bullshit.
would go up there. He went up there and it was 3 or 6 months, and it was really hard on my mom because she had at that point I think 3 kids or 4 kids. There ended
Solo.
up being 5 of us, and he's paying the bills, but she's raising us. My grandmother lived about 3 blocks away, but my mom and my grandma didn't get along really well. My mother was Catholic and my dad was Jewish, and back then that was a big deal. And my grandmother was Jewish. She was very Jewish, and my mother would never leave us all alone with my grandma. I didn't find this out until much later because she was afraid that grandma would have just abducted us and taken us to Israel.
Indoctrinate you?
Circumcised.
Yeah.
Circumcised. Catholic circumcised too, smarty.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Only in America, not in Europe.
Really?
Yeah, they don't circumcise. in
What
Europe.
about South America?
Circumcision is a
Or Central
strangely American phenomenon, and it all goes back to one doctor.
Circumcision?
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Circumcision precedes America.
Well,
by
no,
a
it precedes
long
it, but I mean
shot.
in terms of contemporary times.
It all goes back to one doctor.
Yeah, there was one doctor who
Who's the
started.
doctor?
I forget his name,
Abraham?
but it started in
believe it was.
in New York City. There was one doctor who everyone started going to, Protestants, Catholics, and that's how it became so prominent or prevalent in the United States. Europe, no one gets circumcised. Catholics, Protestants, nobody.
Right. But
Yeah.
it's an Old Testament practice, so it's got to go
Oh,
back.
yeah,
I mean,
it goes back to
not
the
an Old
Torah
Testament practice, but
and-
it
yeah.
was.
Well, I mean, with Jews, with the Hasidic Jews, it's like 13 during bar mitzvah, right? It's not even at birth. It's
Holy
That's
shit.
a horrible thought.
All right, let's
I-
bring
I
it back.
worked with a
Let's
guy
bring
that
it
had-
back.
anyways,
Second point.
But I love the far-ranging aspect of this interview about my life. I appreciate this.
Real hard. Drop it.
Okay,
real.
second
Drop it
point.
real.
Second
Because this is my
point.
life, is these
I
conversations.
was in LA 2 or 3 months ago visiting Vegas. He trip, Vegas, right? And he took me out to some bars in West Hollywood, and there was a roaming magician,
Yeah.
which I didn't think that still happened. I haven't seen that in forever. There's a
Yeah.
roaming musician going through the bar, and I started talking
Magician.
to him. What did I say?
Musician.
Yes, he didn't play no music whatsoever.
No.
He didn't even hum.
the music of magic.
A magician. So
Yeah.
the magician was cruising around. He wasn't doing magic when I saw him. I just happened to start chatting with him.
Yeah.
What are you doing here? Please leave, I told him.
Yeah. Nice. We get that a lot.
That's how I break the ice. And he said he does magic. He's been hired to, I think he actually came out to LA to do magic at that place. You were at, I'm pointing at Paul.
Yes.
You were at a mansion down there. There's
Hollywood Magic Castle.
At that
Magic
time.
Castle.
I was at the
Was
Magic
that
Castle that night.
recently-ish? that you were down there?
Yeah, so we usually do springtime. I'll do a week down there.
Did this guy come up to you? Because I knew you were down there from, I saw a post or something, at the mansion at the same time that I ran into this guy, and I mentioned it to him and asked him if he was planning on going over there for it, if he was aware of it. He knew of the place.
It's in Hollywood,
Did he happen
right?
to approach? Did you get a
I don't recall.
Okay.
I mean, yes, absolutely. It was fantastic.
Okay.
We hooked up. We
Incredible.
chatted. We talked about you.
Synchronicity.
It was nice. Yeah. He was a very charming gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
He did tricks for me. It was magical. Yeah, it was good.
It's
I
like
remember, like it was yesterday.
Larry David joke where he says, if there's one venerable quality about Hitler, I bet he didn't take any shit from magicians.
Jesus Christ.
So anyway, keeping the train on track. So you're living in LA, you're doing magic, it's
I was
blossoming.
performing at the Magic Castle, and I was
meeting,
performing at Vertigo.
The creme de la creme of the industry down there.
Well, I mean,
you're having fun.
I don't know about creme de la creme. Those famous people.
Well, whatever. I don't know how they gauge themselves. I don't know the scale. I don't know how to meter it. But anyways,
They're very
what
judgy.
brings you from down there to all of a sudden this little island down
So
in
this,
the...
my life has been marked by a series of
Here we go.
tragic confluences
Ooh,
in the midst of one right now. That's
like Hemingway type stuff.
Well, I don't think so. I think everyone has this. In my case, what happened was I finished college, and at the same time that I finished college, I got fired from Vertigo.
Why did you get fired?
They just decided. They just downsized. They fired me, and they
Magicians
fired.
are always the first to go.
Well, no, they
Probably
had a
stole
whole
some tequila.
staff there of interactive entertainers. They had a drummer, so they would play. It was a DJ, driven
Event.
party,
Yeah.
but they had a live drummer who would drum every night. They fired me, they fired him. They had a couple of other artists that were regulars there, and it was. I'll tell you what happened.
Here we go.
The accountant, a guy named I don't want to name names. This guy, he was the accountant for us, right, or the bookkeeper for us, and he got mad at the owners because they kept missing meetings, and so he just fired everyone.
He fired the owners, or
No,
fired all the
he
entertainment?
fired all the entertainment. Everyone that the owners loved, he fired them. So I get a phone call, "You're fired," and I'm like, this was like on Friday afternoon, like just as I'm about to go to work.
What was the preface?
You're fired.
Really, just right out of the gate? Hi, Paul, you're fired.
Hi, Paul, you're fired. And the reason
You think Trump started that?
Yeah, and the reason he did this is because he wanted, when the owners showed up, they're going to be like, "Hey, where's the drummer? Where's the magician? Where is everyone?"
Right.
And he's going to be like, "Well, we filed this afternoon. You were not at the meeting, and so we filed everyone." And he was French. I can tell that part.
I hear that.
And so that's how it started. And then they hired me back, and they paid me for the day off and everything. They're like, "You're not fired, Paul." And then, but I had just left. I was just finished college. I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do with my life. Am I going to go to grad school? Am I going to get a job? And I decided, I want to be a magician. And they'd fired me, and so I just decided on the day they fired me, before they hired me back, I decided I'm going to move to San Francisco. I'm going to learn how to street perform, and I'm going to try being a magician for 6 months or a year and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And so I did.
See, this is the part, if I was scripting the actual screenplay for the movie, the auto-biopic, like he would be
Which
saying
movie?
His life,
Okay.
having like that kind of soliloquy.
Paul Nathan story.
Yeah, he would be having that soliloquy, and then I'm going to move to San Francisco, I'm going to make it, damn it, and then it goes dark, and then whoa, opens up the Golden Gate Bridge. All of a sudden, the fog, they call it Carl, by the way, I don't know if you know that, I just learned that the other day, comes in, all the stars, all this kind of psychedelic new...
What's called Carl?
The fog is called Carl.
Yeah, the fog. Here is
Yeah,
called
and then
Carl.
there's me standing in front of the anchorage
with your
with no
suitcase,
crowd and people
no
walking
money.
by, and me trying to get a crowd and crying every night for a year.
Are we talking Pier 39?
Pier 39. So I ended up performing on Pier 39, but also you'd perform in front of the anchorage. There's a
You didn't
kitchen
have any connections, or no? You must have known somebody.
Yeah, I had been coming up here.
Contacts.
So I'd been coming up here. So 6 months before the story that I just told, they had shut Vertigo down. What happened was the owners of the building, it was Myron's Ballroom, the owners of the building called the owners of Vertigo one day, and they just said, "Hey guys, you have to have insurance or you can't open tonight." And this was at like 4 o'clock at night, 4:30 at night.
Yeah.
And the owners got their insurance in time and sent it over. They were like, yep, too late, you can't come in tonight. And they locked Vertigo out. But they opened that night as another club so that they could keep all the money.
Crafty.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a pretty common sneaky practice,
I like it.
right? And of course, 6 months later, they were out of
runs
business. In the
rampant in Los
meantime,
Angeles.
Vertigo, went looking for another space, and they opened another space up.
So that wasn't a one-time thing. The new business wasn't just for the night.
No,
was
it
an
was,
actual
no, they
business
kicked
around
Vertigo
for-
out so that they could keep all the money that Vertigo was making. So the deal was that Vertigo got the door and they got the bar.
Right.
And Vertigo was grossing, I don't know, millions of dollars at the door, and they were grossing millions of dollars at the bar, and that should have been enough for them. But it wasn't.
Wow.
So they
Where
wanted
was
all of it.
Vertigo? Where was the actual edifice?
It was on Flower and...
Hollywood.
No, it was downtown.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was in at that time, there was nothing down there.
Skid Row.
Yeah, it was on the edge of Skid Row. It was in Myron's Ballroom, which was 415 Flower, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
And the only other thing that was down there was a nightclub called Power Tools,
Oh, boy.
which opened at like midnight. It was amazing. So Vertigo looked like a Rolls-Royce dealership.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it was insane. It was 1,500 people, which at that time was giant for a nightclub.
Yeah.
Right? And there was lines of people, just this huge crowds trying to get in, and the place was packed from beginning to end all night long till 4 a.m. But right up the street, they had taken over this abandoned or closed hotel that they were going to demolish, and they turned into this club called Power Tools. It ran for a year or two, and Power Tools, it held again a couple thousand people because it's this old hotel.
Now, is this
and
kind
they're
of like
gonna
an
tear it down.
off the radar type of after hours
very much
type
so.
of thing? Yeah.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's no way that the cops didn't know about it, but they were running without permits,
Right.
or they were pulling temporary permits,
Yeah.
but they were doing it every weekend. And the way you get away with that back then was you hired some off-duty LA cops to come in and
like
you
the
make
good old
sure
days here,
You
right?
got to
Yeah.
grease that
Oakland.
LAPD.
Yeah.
yeah, you just make sure that everyone's got a taste, and you make sure that everyone knows that there's not too much cocaine getting sold, there's not too much ecstasy getting sold, that a bunch of kids aren't getting effed up and dying.
I would have assumed this was pre-MDMA days.
This was in the middle of MDMA.
Oh,
I'll tell
really?
you a story. So this guy, again, I can't name names, but I get a phone call.
Sure you can.
I can't. I'm manning.
No one's gonna listen to this.
I'm manning the phones, and when I wasn't being magician, they would sometimes I would just hold the phones down in the office there, right, and I would man the guest list. And so these people would call up, and the guest list was actually a big deal because to get into this club was a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd get calls from celebrities and this and that.
This is like a Velvet Rope Studio 54 type of
Very,
thing.
very much
Yeah.
so.
Exclusive.
And so that's why they wanted me to work this, because I knew a lot of these people, and I'd contact them at night and everything, and I'd see them and I'd shake hands with them. So like, Paul, can you come in and do it? It's like, yeah, I'll do it, right? So
This is where that Velvet Rope motif found its way into your life. We'll talk about that later. Go ahead.
So I'm working the phones when I get this call. Hey, do you guys have Club Courtesy? My name is blah blah blah. I work over at Grace Jones Club in Dallas. I forget the name of it now.
Grace Jones had a club in Dallas.
She had a club in Dallas, and it was famous because they would sell MDMA over the counter before it was made
course.
illegal
At
to buy
Gracie's
ecstasy,
place.
right?
There we go.
And so this guy, he shows up there that night, and they had just made designer drugs illegal. Designer drugs were like on the radar right then,
Yeah.
but they'd been selling it over the counter at Grace's place, right? When it was legal.
Was that the name of it?
No, it was called. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Fucking phenomenal.
It would be.
Grace's
Grace's
place?
place. Yeah.
So I put him on the list. I'm like, yeah, of course. Well, I'll give you club courtesy. Just make sure you're dressed nice. He's like, duh, of course, man. I'm like, okay, cool. So I get one of the waitresses, comes over and pulls me aside, and she says, like, hey, Paul, there's some guy who wants to say hi. I'm like, okay, walk over. There's this guy. He is model handsome. I mean, just like perfectly attired, handsome, in shape, like gorgeous man, right? And he's dressed just really, really well. Nothing ostentatious, but just really well. And he walks up to me just really confident and puts his hand out, shakes my hand, says, hey, I'm blah, blah, blah. Thanks so much for taking care of me. I'm like, oh,
And
thanks,
he's
man.
the guy you can't tell us who it is?
I can't tell you who he is. But he slips
Why
a
do you keep
baggie.
prodding? You have to let it go.
But he slips a baggie with 100 hits of ecstasy into my hand.
Oh, that's why you can't tell
That's
us.
why I can't tell you who he is.
Okay.
Right? This is just after they made it illegal. And
I bet it was Father
the Star
Guido
Club.
Sarducci.
Was it the Star
It was
Club?
Father Guido Sarducci.
Was it the Star Club that Grace Jones had? The Star
I have
Club?
no idea.
I want to say the Star Club, but I might be wrong. Anyway, so he slips his baggie full of ecstasy in my hands. 100 hits of ecstasy. No, I don't. I've never done ecstasy. I'm a little afraid of designer drugs, but everyone else likes ecstasy, so I just start handing out candy all night long. It was the best night at Vertigo ever. I handed out like 80 hits of ecstasy. Found out later they're going for $40-$50 a hit.
Jesus.
Right? And I'm just giving it away like candy all night long.
The story checks out because I know it's coming back to me. There's some history of MDMA. It did take off in Texas in the mid '80s,
Yeah,
the late '80s.
Well, it was legal.
Yeah.
So anyway, I dose everyone in the club. I dose my bosses, and it's just this awesome night. Everyone's making out. It was an awesome night at the club. And then I don't know, a couple days later, I go over to a girlfriend's house, and she ground guided while I popped one of these things. And
Ground guided?
she stayed sober while I took one of these.
Slick terminology.
Well, the first time.
Ground-guided.
Yeah, first
She
time.
was in
you
the
do it.
radio tower as I pulled into the runway.
Well, I took off from the runway. Yeah.
I love that. Ground guide. It's a military term.
Yeah.
I think, like the do line.
Like the do line, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm full of military
Yes, you are.
non-nomenclature.
So you're all of a sudden being unloaded with tons of ecstasy in LA, and then you just decide to go to San Francisco and leave all that.
Yeah.
Well, you're kind of going back and forth.
I've been going back and forth, and so but I wanted to learn. So I wanted to learn how to be a magician. There's no internet back then. So how do you be a magician? How do you work around the world? There's no one in my family that knew about this. I don't know anyone that does this, but I knew that I would like to try it. And honestly, I thought I would do it for a year or two and then go back to college. But I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. The main thing, I wanted to do it while I was young, so that and broke, and it would be fine.
When you're a young boy.
Well, exactly, because you want to do this before you got a wife and a kids and a mortgage, and you don't look back and say, "I wish I would have." Yeah,
A big bag of ecstasy.
bag of ecstasy.
That was personal use.
yeah.
100.
So I wanted to go. I wanted to try this before I was too old, too committed, too responsible to do something stupid like this. So I thought, well, if I learn how to street perform, then no matter where I'm in the world. Because I wanted to travel, I wherever I was in the world, I could make enough money to have food and make
You've
rent.
got a built-in livelihood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I spent about a year learning how to street perform, and it was the hardest, most
Now, you're talking about street performing
mind-numbingly
in San
grinding
Francisco.
thing. Yeah, it was a horrible grind. It was so hard, and I'd been successful doing magic in nightclubs. I knew how to do it, and I knew what success felt like, and I knew what it was like, and I knew that I was not successful. I knew that I was just getting my ass handed to me every night.
And these are tourists down in the marina.
These were tourists who hated me personally.
So is the grind more difficult with the tourists, you're saying? Yes,
Is anything?
Yeah, I'll have
Greyhound?
Greyhound.
You all right?
I'll have another toddy. Are we just going to continue on with this?
Was more difficult in the street performing sense, which, by the way, I've always had huge respect for you personally, and also for soloists of any kind, right? So you get up and do comedy, you do magic, you do singer-songwriter shit, which I fucking hate. But getting up there by yourself, you were naked. Me in a band and with the circuit, whatever I do, there's like a safety net there for me.
Yeah.
I can't.
Well, it goes two ways, because as we were discussing earlier, it's hard to coordinate between two people, let alone a band full of egos and drug use and girlfriends and boyfriends.
The drug use helps though.
It helps and hurts. Yeah.
So when you're doing are you going solo? Do you have an assistant?
No, I'm solo.
Crazy.
And yes, you are very naked. And when you're street performing, you're interrupting people's day. You've got to have the arrogance to believe that you have something that is more important than whatever it is that they think they're going to do. And it's soul destroying to just have people walk past you and choose to say no over and over and over again. It was, like I said, it was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
Just emotionally, it was really unhealthy. And I'm a fairly sensitive soul, and I'm fairly shy, and I'm fairly insecure. I mean, I think a lot of performers are, we put on our armor and go out and do whatever it is that we hope will make people like us and everything. Well, street performing, when you get good at it, you can do that, but when you are not good at it, it's just 1,000 people a day walking past you and telling you that you're just not good enough and not interesting.
Yeah, you stuck with it.
Yeah.
So
didn't
you
know any
developed
better.
over the time so was the intent to be able to travel?
Yeah.
Right? So you stuck with it, not to build characters so much as to figure out how to work the whole thing and make it work for you.
It was twofold. I needed to learn how to do a stage show. I was a very competent close-up magician. I still am. I was very, very good at doing close-up magician. Little card tricks,
right there.
Small interactions with a small number of people, cards, coins, making small things vanish in someone's hand. I was very good at kids shows.
No, making them vanish.
Oh, making them disappear.
That could be popular amongst the tourist crowd.
But I was not good on stage, and so I needed to learn how to do a stage show, and I wanted to learn how to perform around the world. And so it was a two-pronged sort of thing. And I hired directors. I would pay the best street performers that I knew to come down and watch me and make notes, and they were very giving. The street performing community was very, very giving. They would all volunteer to come down for free and help me out with advice and stuff for free, and I would be like, no, I want to pay you because I want you to sit there for 3 shows and give me notes on 3, because if they would have done it as a favor, they'd come down, they'd have watched the show and give me some notes, which would have been useful, but I wanted to actually make them watch me 2 or 3 times and really get into it and dig deeper than just that. Because
you could have one day that could be an off day or a great day.
Yeah.
But across 3, you're going to get a proper sampling.
Yeah.
Right.
And I hired a few people and I would pay them to write jokes for me, and I invested pretty heavily in improving what I was doing.
That's atypical?
It is atypical. Yeah. I still hire writers and I hire
especially
directors.
For a street performer to go to those lengths to improve their game, that's not usual.
It was unusual, but I think I was significantly less talented than most of the other ones, and I think I needed it more.
Okay, that's a fucking great story. You were at Pier 30. You were in Fisherman's Wharf area?
So it was primarily Fisherman's Wharf. Union Square was not great for busking back then. It was much more dangerous until they redid the square, and then once they redid the square, there was other challenges. Are we toasting to your health?
School.
Mr. Dillashow has come back from the bar with more delicious bebiendos.
He'll do that. Bebidas para nosotros.
Oh, that's good.
I didn't know this.
What?
This
What
makes
I
lots
missed?
of sense.
Oh, it's busking
in a capsule,
down
getting working on his game by bringing other people into it to actually critique it, which is like you don't see a whole lot of musicians do that. So
they have
sense.
talent.
You get people, no. There's so many singers.
We're talking about a lot of people
who have no
right?
talent whatsoever. They're still going to go out and do their shit.
Yeah.
That's what open mics are for.
Yeah.
And there's not unless you go
that's
to it.
part of it. Part of it is just going out and doing it 100 times or 1,000 times.
Right.
And the audience will tell you there's this Pavlovian response that you cannot teach someone. They can only experience by watching the audience laugh and getting that adrenaline hit of the audience laughing, and you slowly sort of, over time hone your timing in a way that you can't get from watching videotapes, from direction. You have to do it live, and then once you get that, once you experience that, then you start hitting different levels of performance ability. But I was one of the least talented performing artists that I knew, and there were all these guys who were just so much better than I was. They'd started younger, they were better at it, they were more interesting. And so I just really felt like I needed to work a lot harder, and I did. I would take any gig anywhere for any money, and I just worked all the time.
If you sucked still, would you keep doing it? No.
Yeah. Oh, if I still suck now? I don't know. Sometimes I do still suck now.
No, come on.
What? No. One
this
thing
was
that
what,
was
20 years ago?
30 years ago.
30 years ago.
This was one of the things that was.
This was
89.
chronologically, we're like early 90s now.
89. I moved back. I moved to San Francisco the day of the earthquake. So
Did you really?
1989. Yeah.
Wow. Were you in the marina when it hit?
Yeah, I was. I was soaking
What a fucking great intro.
Yeah. I was soaking
Ladies
wet.
and gentlemen, Paul Nathan has arrived.
There was this boat down there that had a parachute on the back, and they would hoist you up. They would take off. They'd gun the engine, and the air would pull you up, right? And then they would stop, and you would start to fall down, right? And so they'd been buzzing past the ballpark because it was during the World Series.
Right.
And so I come to them, and I'm just starting to do street shows there. And I'm like, hey, why don't we do this? I'll do an upside-down straitjacket escape while I'm hanging from this thing, and we'll call the newspapers, and we'll call the TV stations, and we'll let them know that we're doing
What a
this.
little media
and maybe
hoo-ha.
we'll get some promo out of this. And they're like, yeah, well, let's do it. So I go out to practice it because I had never done a straitjacket escape before in my life.
Time out. On Earthquake Day? We're talking about?
This was on Earthquake Day, yeah.
Hold on. Fuck. I'm trying to synchronize. What the fuck? Okay.
It's still tracking.
This whole podcast is just
Back
going to
up
hell
a
in a
little bit, see
handbasket.
if,
No.
No, back up. Let's see. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still tracking.
We'll fix it in
Alright.
post. It's fine.
Yeah. Don't worry. Go ahead. So, anyways, get back.
Yeah. So it's the day before Earthquake Day, and then I'm talking to these guys. So back then, Pier 39 had two street performing pitches. One was the main stage, and the other one was on the side. And right by the side, it was right next to where they would sell these tours, these parachute tours, parasailing tours. And so I'm talking to these guys, and so we come up with this idea, and I say, okay, but I need to practice this.
I never knew about this.
So we say, okay, I'll come over tomorrow, and because I need to hang upside down. I need to try this once. I don't want to try it the first time in front of the cameras, which is probably a mistake because
Attached to an actual parachute.
yeah. So
It's a good thing.
Just give it some gas.
So I borrow a parachute from someone. I mean, a straitjacket from someone. I've never done a straitjacket escape. I show up on the boat with my girlfriend and her mother. My girlfriend had just moved from Chicago. Her mom was out visiting, and I'm on this boat, and I'm practicing doing this, and I screwed up, and I ended up soaking wet. I ended up in the water, wearing a parachute, hanging upside down, wearing this parachute, getting dragged along behind this boat, choking on salt water. And then, they pulled me back out, and I'm like, no, do it again. So I go up and I do it again. I do it a couple times, and then we get off there, and but I'm, head to toe in seawater. And so I start walking with my girlfriend and her mom. We walk down. They want to see Pier 39 and Fisherman's Wharf. So we start walking along. We're walking over to Ghirardelli Square. I'm still soaking wet. And we poke our heads in this little shop where there's like T-shirts and such. And right then the world fell apart.
Wow.
And, so I grabbed them and threw them out of the store.
And that was one of the more pronounced districts that felt it, obviously.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you could see the earth moving. You could
Like
Because it's
watch
landfill,
it. Yeah, it was a
landfill.
wave. Yeah, it's all landfill.
Marina's all landfill.
So you could see it. And then...
Isn't that a fascinating thing?
Yeah.
I was coaching football, believe it or not, at a high school when it hit, and we were on this big playing field, practice field, right?
Right.
And literally saw the goddamn earth like undulating. It was,
Yeah.
which you don't think is, it seems like it's a movie thing.
Yeah.
And the trees, just these giant
trees wave back and forth,
eucalyptus
yeah.
trees just tossing them.
Wow. This was down
It was in South Bay.
Yeah.
Just right over the hill from the epicenter.
Okay, so you
This is in
got
San
it
Jose.
way worse than we did then.
Yeah, but still, the sediment, right? If
Yeah.
you don't sink in the bedrock,
topsoil.
then that's why the marina got tossed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's why the bridge or the
Oakland Bay Bridge.
Oakland
Yeah.
Connect smashed 50
That
people.
was that
was
earthquake. Yeah.
Yeah, but was that a
I don't know what the...
incredible? So that was the first. That was the first day.
That was my first official day back in town. I'd been coming back and forth. My
That's
first
kind of a
day.
telling story. I'm surprised
awesome.
you've never told me that before.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm surprised you never thought
doesn't
to
trust
tell
you.
Well,
yourself that before.
and that was part of the problem with learning how to street perform, because from that day, street performing had been really lucrative and good until then, and then from that day forward, none of the tourists showed up
Nobody
for about
wants
a
to
year.
see any magic.
And so it was this dead zone. I had moved here just at the exact wrong time to try and learn how to do anything. But a year later, when tourists started coming back and everything, I really honed my craft, and I was able to glean some amount of success. But if I'm at all successful or at all funny or at all competent or good, it's not because of any innate talent. It's because of just hard work and a lot of help from a lot of really smart people.
Tenacity. So let's fast forward, dude. Then how do you get hooked up with all these crooks and gangbangers in the underworld?
Well, that was all Joe Bullock.
Isn't it all? He's
Yeah, how
next.
did you meet him?
He's next, by the way.
Joe Bullock.
off on that tangent.
You know, there's all these people here
Put him
that
on
you,
the
that you
rotisserie.
like last week. You're talking
Oh,
to
I've
Cat
got a
Robichaux,
pan- I've got
and
a
you're like,
pantheon,
"Oh,
yeah.
it's all Paul Nathan or just this and everything." Well,
Yeah.
Joe Bullock is my Paul Nathan.
I don't know how to interpret that.
I do. Absolutely. Good.
You mean you
That's
sit
great.
at home with a sock puppet on?
I do.
Talking to him like I do with you?
Yeah, I do that. No, I mean that he.
I've never heard you do it, Paul. Can you do that?
Oh yeah. How you doing? Deli. Let's go get something to eat. All right, Paul. What do you want to eat? I don't know. Just something
Shift
quick.
to Joe.
I gotta go.
Shift to Joe.
Oh, Joe Bullock.
Well,
With
first
this
you want to
song.
go get something to eat, then you got to figure out what the place is. You want to get it, and then if you have enough money to go get the stuff, then you don't know if you even can afford lunch, so it turns into a whole big phenomenal hassle.
So, for those of you in the podcast world who don't know Joe, which at this point is a
You
lot of
will
people,
soon.
Joe for
I think he's kind of semi-retired now.
yeah, he's pretty retired now.
That's when you get him.
Joe from the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, Joe was the underground nightclub
Late
scene
70s?
here.
That far back?
Yeah, that far back.
No way.
Yeah, he started with 5 Foot Tongue, with, oh my
Late
God.
70s? He's not that old.
Joe's 70 years old.
Is he really?
Yeah.
I thought he was about mid-60s. Well, I guess.
This is an argument for doing drugs.
Yeah, I guess so.
It actually
The
is.
resilience.
Yeah, the
It's called
total
pickling.
resilience.
Well, yeah.
Joe had, he ran Climate Theater,
Yeah.
which was, this great underground
Was it
theater.
always at the 9th and Folsom?
It was across the street from there, and then where the part
What?
that you know.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, the area that you know, that
It was at the
non-salon
Wiener
space,
Schnitzel place across 9th or across Folsom?
up from there.
Oh, up from there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it was middle of the block.
Yeah.
So the space that you know is a non-salon. That was the offices for Climate Theater, and then we would used to throw these rent parties there. You know about this, and then. So that's when I came on the scene in '89. Joe was doing these incredible, giant
Yeah.
parties, 50 Oak Street.
Yes.
He would find these incredible spaces and throw these huge parties there. And then he went to Burning Man, back when Burning Man was 2,500 people.
Yeah, that all coalesced.
And then he said, "Well, you guys need to do parties in San Francisco," and they started doing
Joe said that to you? Or
to
what are you
Larry
talking-
Harvey.
Oh.
And Larry and Joe kind of teamed up, and they started doing these flambe lounges here in San Francisco.
Bay Lounge, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
And
Yeah.
those sort of became this epicenter for creativity for Burning
Yeah.
Man, just as the internet is starting to connect people.
Right.
Yeah.
And-
Which was
Mid-90s.
94-ish.
Mid-90s, yeah.
95-ish.
A little before that, like 91, 92-ish. And then but on the board of Climate Theater was Craig Newmark, who
That's
invented
right.
Craigslist.
Yeah.
And so there was him, and then there was the Squid List was the other big thing that
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
that was
Forgot
the
about
two
the
big
Squid
places.
List.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're dipping now.
Those are the two
Yeah.
big connectors for the folks that
Holy
were into
shit.
the Burning Man
Yes.
scene. And then you end up with this whole San Francisco community here, and then he produced Decompression. And I believe he still produces Decompression. He did
No,
last year.
I don't think so.
Well, and the fact that they were tapping in, because I remember I was working at Silicon Graphics when the 1994 was kind of
Yeah.
the year that the public started catching on to,
Right.
for the first time for the email and
Yeah.
the web in general,
Yep.
right? And the fact is that that culture represented by Flambe Lounge and Squid List were super nerds, super
Yep.
geeks, right?
Yep.
We're right at the front, like this is
Kicking
Tribe
down the
came
door.
shortly after this, right?
Yep. Yeah, that was just before Tribe.
No. You guys
Yes,
are
it did.
making quantum leaps now.
No. They were
Tribe
close-
wasn't
close
until
succession.
like 2003, 2004.
We could look this up. We don't have to
I
argue
don't
about
have to
it.
look it up. I
Oh,
know.
all our
What I say
prefer to
is
argue.
truth.
We
It
prefer
is
to-
the
But
law.
I'll give you that. So back in the Anon Salon days, so this was before they shut down, before I came in on it with them. Back when you go to a non-salon, so non-salon was this little rabbit warren of rooms. It was a giant fire trap, is what it was. But you could get about 100 people in there safely and legally,
This is
and
about
they
the
would
time I
cram
walked
about
into it.
500
Yeah.
people in.
There's a little cavernous kind of
It was it
labyrinth.
was so built to fail.
Yeah.
It's amazing it didn't.
Yeah, so
In terms of
they would
catastrophe.
redecorate the different rooms, and you worked for SGI, but what was the precursor of Adobe? It was Macromedia.
Yeah.
Remember Macromedia? So these guys, the owner of Macromedia, the founder of Macromedia, used to come to the Anon Salon parties, and Joe would just give him a room, and so you'd walk into this room, and there'd be a piano keyboard, and there'd be a video projector, which this was like insane to see a video projector back then,
Multimedia.
right? And they would have an SGI computer, like some giant workstation computer there on a rolling cart, right? And plugged into this video projector against the wall, and you would play the piano, and there'd be a little stick man. And using Macromedia's new technology, Dreamweaver, not Dreamweaver, what was it? Macromedia, I don't remember the name of it now. Not Dreamweaver, Dreamweaver's Adobe. Anyway, they would use this Macromedia product, and it would allow you to make the stick man dance by playing the piano. And this was just the cutting edge.
Seminal.
And then they did Cobra Lounge, which was all just this new technology vaudevillians. So like Derek McGee, who would do a ham bone act with these MIDI buttons all over his body, and he'd be slapping different things and make different noises and everything. It was like, this was crazy town, years ahead of anyone else.
And to add some color and context to this times, we're talking about ramping up the first tech boom.
Yeah, this was...
But we're talking about the fucking the nose of this whole thing. Like,
Right.
Tribe begat or Napster. The Tribe was super instrumental in things. Granted, it came a little bit later.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is, the culture here that you're talking about, there was so much that was world changing that was happening. That fascinates me, that we were hanging out at that time together in this city.
Yeah. Yeah, we were absolutely, I say we, I wasn't, but people around me were changing the world. I was,
Well, but they were coming to these parties, and we were interacting, unbeknownst
I was vomiting
to any
in a
of us
toilet
that it was
I was holding your hair back,
trying to make
feeding you more alcohol. So anyway, we were, but Joe was this, like, the king of celebration at this time, and he was the epicenter of this celebration. And Joe was the guy who came up with the idea of, if you wear a costume, you get in for $5 off. And so San Francisco became this place where everyone was doing cosplay 10 years before the word cosplay was a thing. And you knew you were going to a Joe party because everyone out front was wearing a ridiculous outfit, right? And then they came up with like Bunny Jam for Easter.
Yeah.
You'd have 500 people dressed as bunnies.
You're talking about the 9th and Folsom location now at this point.
Yeah, so...
And then they sold it during the height of the tech boom, or not sold it, but he gave it over to...
Joe got closed down by the cops, so he just rented it out. He leased it out to a couple of .coms.
Some office.
And made a lot of money doing that. And then at the tail end of that, I came back in.
Now we're getting about 2003. I remember this episode.
This is 2003.
This is when things really, the fire started to coalesce.
This is 2003. So I had so during this whole .com boom, what happened was, I'm being hired weekly, daily to do corporate events, to do IPO parties.
Gravy train.
The money was just rolling in. This was back when your wife worked for me.
Yeah.
The fucking city was hemorrhaging money.
So was Paul.
That was insane.
Just hemorrhaging it.
I was doing really well. It was nice. And your wife was my secretary for a big chunk of that.
We went out. We were having all kinds.
That
of
was
fun.
a great time. We'd go to work at noon.
Yeah.
We'd work for a couple of hours, and
Stay
then
up
we'd
all night
go
at the
dancing
Highball
until
Lounge. The Inferno Lounge.
And at that time, remember this,
Market?
where this was right turn of the century before the bubble burst, right?
Yep.
There were lists, there were forums and lists that artists and performers could get on, where you could go eat for free, eat and drink like a goddamn like royalty every night, because all these tech companies, all these .com startups wanted to have hip people involved with it. So there was
it wasn't just hip. They wanted creative people.
Right.
They wanted
one and the same.
Yeah, they're not the same thing. I would argue
they were to them. They were through the
creative people represented that
Yeah.
legitimized them.
Yeah.
So they would never. I never got turned away, and we'd go in with
clown
crazy
makeup
looking people, and they didn't give a shit at that point. It's like you walk in, they know that we're coming in here to vulture the whole thing.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, but you're also adding a thought process and creative solutions to problems that they don't have otherwise.
Nowadays we call it intentional content,
and that's what's missing.
Yeah,
it's not the same. It's sitting right there. The same opportunity. We can get to that later. But.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're at 2003. I'm.
You're doing your business. This is the part where you had a little decision.
We just closed Twisted Cabaret, and I had just finished touring, and it was like May or June, and I'm about to I was going to go to Europe. I had a bunch of money in the bank. I had some free time, and I was like, I'm going to go to Europe. I'm going to finally spend
The
the
jobs
summer
are
in
kind of
Europe.
drying up because of the bust. And
No, the bust wasn't till later.
the bust was like 2001.
It was 2001. I'd gotten through the bust, and we were on the far side of that.
Yeah.
I just had money and time in the same place for the first time in years,
Yeah.
and I wanted to take the summer off and go to Europe and street perform. The dream that I had wanted, I'd spent all this time working on. I was finally that good and that connected, and I had money to go ahead and do it. I was just going to go ahead and go to Europe and street perform for the summer and find the festivals and sleep my way across Europe. Right, that was the plan. That was the goal. And I'm on my motorcycle. I'm riding up the street, and I see
Moped.
It was a moped. I'm riding up on my moped, and I'm going at 9th and Folsom Street. I'm on 9th, going past Folsom, and I see a sign up there that says for rent. And I was like, oh, that's Joe's place. And I was like, oh, I could go away for the summer, or I could start a theater. And so I foolishly started a theater instead. And so we relaunched Climate Theater, and I opened that space back up, and we started throwing parties there again.
This was
and
the other half of the Anon Salon with the stage.
And then basically, I conned Joe into doing parties again, because he was really afraid to do parties, and he was making money just
it
renting
was
the
a
space
slow,
out.
yeah.
It took me a while to con him into it. But he was making money hand over fist with Anon Salon.
God.
But because they were cramming 600, 700 people into a space that should hold 100.
Yeah.
And going till 6 in the morning, and then I had Climate Theater there. We were doing tons of amazing art there, and then that's when I started doing the absinthe parties.
That's right.
And it was $20 a head. I remember 15 to 20, which
Yeah.
was unusual for that time. I remember.
Yeah.
If you got to see live
Unless
music,
you
was
just
hopping
made
at
a
that
funny
point.
face at Isaac and walked around him.
Yeah, just trick him.
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
snap
too
over
many
here and
comps.
go that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was worth it ultimately.
Yeah.
those
That
parties
$20.
were-
I mean, the
those parties
people,
were
the
amazing.
underbelly
Once a month,
representation
and every
at that,
time it was a
at
hit.
those parties
Yeah.
were fucking phenomenal.
Yeah. So that was 2003. We opened that. In 2004, 2005, I flew over to Europe, and I was doing, I think it was 2004. I was in Europe doing a film, and I flew over there with a dance partner of mine. We were doing this thing, and on our day off, we're in Dusseldorf. We're going to the Altstadt in Dusseldorf, and there's this liquor store, and they've got a bunch of absinthe in the window. And we're like, absinthe? I thought this was illegal. And so we go in and we buy a suitcase full of absinthe, and we
This
smuggle
is
it back
Well,
in.
now-
2004.
Okay, let me get a little footnote. Remember Absinthia? We were already drinking absinthe before you left.
We were, yes. We were, but this was... So
This was store-bought and not
this was
bathtub
store-bought,
made.
European...
Yeah.
properly distilled absinthe. So Absinthia's, I later learned, and that I'm actually invested in her absinthe now.
I did not know that.
She makes the best absinthe in America right now.
Is it what it was back in those days? 'Cause
No, back then, nothing against what she was doing. I loved what she was doing at the time, but she wasn't distilling it. What she would do is she would get, the various herbs, and she would put it into high-test alcohol, and she would let it sit for 6 weeks, and it would... the alcohol would leach out the essential oils.
That's what that was?
Yeah, that's what that was.
That's
and
a sham.
So was there
it's not
wormwood
sham.
involved?
There was wormwood, absolutely.
wormwood.
And you would get the thujone from it, and it was fine, and it tasted good, and it was delicious, and that was all good. But
I ended up naked on a beach.
yeah. Who didn't? but the way that it's traditionally made is you distill it, and so now she's able to she's gone to a still, and she's properly distilling it, and she's legal, and she's gotten all of the licenses, and all of the labeling is done and everything, and so she produced this product last year called Absinthia, and it's beautiful bottles. It is light. It's a Swiss style absinthe. It's stunning. It's so good. It's like I said. I think it's the best absinthe made in America. And she was looking for investors, so I invested in it. And her next batch is out. Like literally, I paid for the bottles this morning.
Yeah.
And it's being bottled right now, and it'll be delivered in about 3 weeks. Absinthia. You should try it. It's delicious absinthe.
Try it now, TM.
Yeah. So anyway, going back. So I'm shooting this film. We go downtown. We buy all this absinthe. We smuggle it back in. So I end up with like 20 bottles of
How'd you
absinthe.
smuggle it?
In a suitcase. I wore
Remember
a
the good old
suit.
days when you could smuggle
Paul
in
has
suitcases?
some great smuggling stories.
Well, you used to be able to do that. You can't.
I've
it's
never
difficult
done
to
it.
smuggle.
I'm too
No,
paranoid.
there's a trick to it. What you do, you just put the stuff in your suitcase, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you want to smuggle.
Right.
And then you wear a suit.
Right.
And you stand right in front of a hippie who's wearing a backpack with a Canadian flag on it, right? And if you can find a flight from Amsterdam where the hippies reek of marijuana, and you can stand in front of those guys, then you're wearing a suit and they're a dirty hippie.
Yeah.
And so
they're jumping on the grenade.
yeah. So they just move along, sir, move along. We have hippies to get to, and then they search the hippie with their filthy, dirty
This
hippie
was back
backpacks.
in the day, though.
This was back in the day. So anyway, so I walk in with a suitcase full of absinthe, and I call up a bunch of my friends, and we put actually a note out on Squid List, and there wasn't Facebook at the time. There was probably MySpace. There was an absinthe group on MySpace, so I put a note out and just start calling friends. And I thought 20, maybe 50 of my friends would show up for this absinthe party. 250 people show up for this absinthe party, including Barnaby Conrad, who had written the book on absinthe, History in a Bottle. And he does this whole talk on absinthe, and we get musicians to play.
Did you invite him, or
I did invite him, and he showed up and he signed books and he did a whole talk. And
because nobody at that point was dealing in the world of absinthe.
No one knew what it was.
It was from what I remember.
Yeah, so remember, this was before you could buy it on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So over the coming next 2 years, you started being able to buy it on the internet. People would buy it, but you never knew what you were buying, right? And the stuff was $60-$80 a bottle, $100 a bottle, and the dollar was.
And it was like Scope with Everclear.
Some of it was delicious. You didn't know. So part of what we did for this party was we would serve 20, 30 different brands, so you could taste what it was that you liked. And then you could decide, I love this, I want to buy this, and then they could buy it on the internet.
So you're thinking at an ensemble was a satellite of that?
That's what we did that at Anon.
That was at an ensemble.
Yeah, we did Climate Theater, and Anon was there, and so I would throw my parties. We would do these crazy fetish events. We would do the more art events that I wanted to do. We would do the theater events that were there, and then we would throw the absinthe parties were really, really successful. We did that for a while, and then a couple days before New Year's on end of 2005, beginning of 2006, we got busted, and that by the police, the man.
ATF.
Wait, 2006. Okay.
2005.
2005-06.
It was 2 days before New Year's
Eve.
Eve.
How'd it happen? What went down?
So it's December 29th, 2005, and
It was a stormy night.
it was not a stormy night. I believe it was clear. It was a clear night.
Fuck.
And the cops show up. They arrest everyone.
Wow.
They didn't arrest everyone. They
arrested you.
They arrested me. They arrested my bar staff, and there was 5 of us. And they said, and they took all of our absinthe. They confiscated the absinthe, and they confiscated the money in the tills, and they confiscated our guest list and anything they thought was relevant. And they ended up leaving a bunch of the alcohol because there was too much absinthe. Mm-hmm. They brought over a pickup truck, and they filled up the pickup truck with absinthe, and there wasn't enough room for everything else. So they got tipped off. I mean,
they must have been tipped off.
They were tipped off.
Didn't you have like a little case, like a little hutch with all the absinthe locked up in it?
We did, and they didn't get into that.
Ooh, that was the good stuff.
Yeah, we had like 3 different, I don't want to say hiding places, but storage lockers basically for absinthe, and they found 2 of them, and they didn't find the other
holes.
One. Yeah. So anyway, so they bust us, and I called up an attorney here in San Francisco named Mark Rennie, who specializes in alcohol-related incidents, and he gave me the best advice of any lawyer ever. I called him up, and of course I was like, look, I'm looking at, a couple grand in seized cash. I'm looking at $10,000 worth of seized absinthe. This is, at this point, all of my money, basically, and I was, and I was not, and I was looking at, potentially jail time, and I had, and I'd committed that I would, pay the legal fees of all the other people who were involved, which, now I was looking at, potentially $100,000 in legal fees.
Bar staff?
Yeah, bar staff. Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to let them, face it alone, and so, it was, or I would have let them, trade, turning state's evidence against me to get off. I would have had that conversation with them. I wasn't going to let them go down for my party, and they knew that. Right. We'd had this discussion, but they also knew what they were in for. They got paid very well to be here. They made a lot of tips being here, and they enjoyed being part of the naughty team that was doing this.
Aware of the risk.
They were aware of the risk. But, at the same time, I didn't feel like I felt as though this was my responsibility. So, so I called Remy up, and he says, well, what have they charged you with? I said, well, I don't know. We haven't been charged with anything. He says, then don't worry about it. Until they charge you, there's nothing. I said, okay. So they haven't charged us. They haven't charged us. And it's the day that we're supposed to go to court. And I'm going to plead not guilty. And we walk in. And in the meantime, I've done a bunch of research. And it turns out that what they've charged us with was not possession of absinthe. It was selling a poisonous substance in alcohol.
Wormwood.
They were saying that the wormwood was poisonous. In the meantime, I do the math on this, and I'm like, actually, wormwood, it is my burden of proof to prove that this quote-unquote poisonous substance is in fact safe. So I'm doing the math and everything and doing a bunch of research. Turns out that wormwood in the amounts that we were serving was legal in America since like the Clean Food and Drug Act of 1963, the year I was born. Something like that. It was 63 or 69, I don't remember now. So we were off the hook. I just had to prove it. In the meantime, I could also prove that the European Union was selling this legally over the counter, and they were selling it, 100, millions and millions of liters a year.
And via the internet.
But the internet doesn't mean it's safe. But selling it within the European Union does mean it's safe. And so the fact that it had been cleared by the EU to sell meant that it could not be that unsafe. And then the fact that it was cleared by the FDA.
Yeah.
So
It was legal at that point in the States to have
the amount of thujone in there, the psychoactive they were claiming was the problem, was the issue, and they didn't know enough about it to know that it was the thujone. They just knew that absinthe was illegal, so they never charged us. They went to this, and there was other problems. We didn't allow them to come in. We told them they couldn't come in. So they had potentially broken and entered to come in and were trespassing. There was a bunch of problems with this. So we were never charged.
Wow.
I was fine with being charged because I knew that if we went to court, this was going to be just a bunch of press releases. I'd get famous. This was going to be talk shows, and this would do great for my magic career. Yeah. And so I was.
Are you the inside job on this?
To paint some color on it, it was the first person that ever been charged with or selling absinthe since the old law went on the books.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
My team of there was 5 of us. My team of 4 and myself are the only people ever arrested for selling absinthe in the 100-year ban.
Wow.
Since it was banned in 1911.
Here's to that.
Yeah.
That is. I'm going to do a little Photoshop certificate. Get the drink.
So that turns into a book deal. Turns into a consulting deal with an absinthe company. It turns
Johnny
into
Carson. Dun, dun, dun,
no. Well, no. I wanted to do press releases on this, but Joe is running an illegal underground nightclub.
Because that's still going on. And so am I. And Joe's like, yeah, no, we're not doing any of this. Also. Yeah. So Joe did not want to get into it with the authorities. He did not want to publicize this. He wanted to stay on
Joe's
the DL.
Like, I just put a rooftop garden on the place,
Exactly.
We got some flambe fires going on up there, and I don't know what you're trying to do.
And Joe was older than me, and he was wiser than me, and he was smarter than me, and he was probably right. It might have done my career some good. It might have splashed in a pan. It might have done nothing. But it would have not been good for our illegal nightclub business. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So we didn't do anything with it. We quietly. Joe didn't want me to call them and get my absinthe back either. And I'm like, no, Joe, that's $10,000 worth of absinthe. It was actually more than that. So I called my lawyer, Paul Spiegel, eclecticlaw.com.
He's our lawyer too.
Yeah, everyone in the arts. He's their lawyer. If we ever sue each other, we can.
We are dust. Yeah.
He made some comment about that when we first talked to him.
He did. Yeah, he's got all kinds of confluence of interests going on.
Yeah, he represents probably a half dozen different theater companies. He sits on the board of a few different theater companies. He represents probably 50, 100 artists in town. Yeah, you can't do art in this town without talking to Paul Spiegel.
Right.
So.
And he was the one who ended up being the litigious go-between, right?
So he wasn't litigious. So I called Rennie up. Rennie gave me this great advice. We go in, they drop the charges against us, and I call Spiegel up, and I'm like, hey, Paul. So Paul is not just my lawyer; he's one of my closest friends.
Sure.
And I say, okay, Paul, what do you got to do? So he looks up who's the representative, who's the legal representative for the alcoholic beverage company? It was the state that rated us, not the city. So who's the ABC's legal representative? Turns out the guy went to Cal with him. So he calls the guy up, he's like, hey, it's Paul Spiegel, go Bears. And the guy's like, oh, go Bears. And Paulie's like, yeah, so my client got a little busted the other day, and
We've got a little
this
busty
guy
bust
says,
on our hands.
is your client happen to be the absinthe guy? And he's like, well, yes. He goes, I've been expecting this phone call.
The absinthe guy.
Yeah. So Spiegel's like, yeah, we'd like our absinthe back. He's like, yeah,
The
you can't have
nepotism.
your absinthe back. He said it's illegal, and Spiegel's like, it's illegal to sell. It's illegal to smuggle it in. But he wasn't convicted of either of those things. And he's like, yeah, but he was selling it. And Spiegel's like, but he wasn't convicted. He wasn't even charged with it. So it doesn't exist. So he'd like his property back. They're like, yeah, well, if it was cocaine, we wouldn't give him cocaine back. And he's like, cocaine is illegal. It's legal to possess absinthe. My client would like his absinthe. Is he going to sell it again? My client wants his absinthe back. So they're like, okay, well, we need to do some checking on this and see if it is in fact illegal, because we don't want to be the assholes that gave you back your product and then
They're
find
back
out
to
that it was in
Dakota.
fact
Yeah.
illegal, right? You don't want to be the cop that gives the junkie his cocaine back, right? That's
It could be a good PR move.
it could be a bad PR move. So I call him up. He says, give us a month. I call him up 6 months or a month later. Spiegel's out of the country. He says, just call him yourself. So I call him up, and they're like, yeah, we were going to say yes. We were all set to say yes, but then someone suggested we should probably talk to the feds first. So they call the feds up. In the meantime, the feds have got the guys from Taboo Absinthe and the guys from
Taboo absinthe. I forgot about that. We had all those
Yeah.
shirts.
yeah, no, not Taboo. Sorry,
St. George?
nope, the bad absinthe. Lucid Absinthe.
Yeah.
Lucid was a bunch of lawyers from New York that put this together, and then the other one that was the first absinthe here in America was Swiss Absinthe. Uwe, I can't remember his name now. Anyway, they were going in front of the FDA, and they were arguing for this. And right then, this court case comes in, and they call the FDA up, and they're calling the feds up, and they're like, "What do you want to do about this? Do you want to pursue this? What do you want to do?" And they're like, yeah, this is going to go to court at some point. And when it does, we're going to lose. We're going to lose publicly, and then all bets are off.
Right.
So we're just going to make this legal. And so they went ahead and they allowed Lucid and this other company whose name I can't remember to go ahead and sell in America. But they gave them a bunch of guff about their.
That's what broke the reins.
That's what broke the ban. Yeah. So that ended the 100-year ban, and then there's a company that started selling absinthe. They hired me to be their consultant, flew me around the world to go to.
That wasn't St. George?
No, it wasn't St. George. It was La Tourmente Verte.
That's right.
La Tourmente Verte. They were.
That's where we went to the La Tourmente Verte distribution factory in France.
Yes.
Wasn't that?
Yeah.
So
So what would
manufacturing factory.
Yeah, it was their distillery there,
Yeah,
in the bottling
yeah.
plant. So what would happen was, I would fly over to Europe and I would be doing a show. Like I was at the Georgstraat Palast in Hanover, and I would work 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week doing this variety show, and I have a couple days off, and I would just jump on a train, and then La Tourmente Verte would pay for me to go down to Switzerland
Yeah.
and do a bunch of blogs about absinthe and tour these absinthe distilleries and take photos and everything and write about it and discover about it. And then I would come in and consult with them about what's the state of the absinthe. Because at that point I knew more about not absinthe per se, but the absinthe market than just about anyone else in America, because we'd been selling it and we had sold, there's 210 brands on the market at that
Been
point, and
drinking
I had
it.
tasted 180 of them.
Did you
190
do
of them.
this with any intention of putting yourself in those shoes?
No.
Was your interest in absinthe was strictly for...
He just wanted to have a nice
I
little.
need to tell the
party.
truth. Nobody's going to listen to this.
Yeah.
As previously mentioned.
We'll cut this part out.
But you were just passionate about absinthe.
I wasn't even particularly passionate about absinthe in the beginning. I mean, it was for us. It was an Easter egg at first. When you travel through Europe, we'd be doing shows or be on set somewhere, and you take a break for the day or for a couple of days, or your project ends, and now you got a couple of days in Europe, and you go to the museums. But I'm only good in a museum for about 3 hours, and then my head implodes from just all of the input, right? And and then you go to a church and you see these cool Gothic churches if you're in that part of the region, or you see these crazy different Protestant churches or Catholic, and you hear the stories. Walk through the old towns with the old buildings, and you hear the stories about the cities, and you learn the history and everything, and it's magical and it's wonderful, and it really connects you with your past in a way that you can't get reading out of books, right? And it's immersive and it's wonderful, but at some point, you want to do something else. So we would go and look for, we'd go dancing and look for fun dance things, or we'd look for, stuff that was off the beaten trail. And having this little absinthe hobby, it gave me an excuse to go to these distilleries in places we would never go to, and see cities we would never go to, and to discover not just the absinthe, but the city around the absinthe and the history around the absinthe. And it was such a rich history, and it happened so late. It really started in the late 1700s, and so it's documented. So the history is very much prevalent and available if you go looking for it. And the history of absinthe is, the history of Western culture at that time. And so you get to discover all about the phylloxeramites and what they did to the
absinthe murders.
The absinthe murders in Switzerland in 1906. Jean Lanfrey, going in and shooting his wife and daughter.
Over absinthe? There was a correlation?
So it was called the absinthe murder, hit the papers as the absinthe murder. He woke up one morning and, takes a mouthful of brandy to wash the night's flavor out of his mouth. There's no scope back then.
We used to call it the night's flavor.
Yeah. There's no scope, there's no Listerine. You use brandy or you use whatever. So he washes his mouth out with some brandy, and then, he has a glass of absinthe for breakfast. And
then he gets a knife.
Then he goes out to work in the farm. But before he does, his boots are over by the door, and they're really dirty. They're muddy, and he wants to go gathering mushrooms that night. So he tells his wife, "Clean my boots so I can go gathering mushrooms." She's like, "Clean them yourself, whatever." So he goes out. He has a creme de menthe for lunch, and an absinthe for lunch, and then he has a brandy for lunch, and then he drinks a bunch of piquette, which is this really deep, heavy red wine. Has a few liters of that while he's out working in the fields.
Liters?
Yeah, a few liters of this. Has a couple of beers, and then he comes home. He has a glass of absinthe and a brandy, and then sees that his boots are still over there, uncleaned. Gets into a fight with his wife. Walks over to the closet, pulls out his service rifle,
and shoots her.
And shoots her.
That's
Caps her
not
right
nice.
above her right eye. And then turns and fires on his little daughter and kills his little daughter, Blanche.
Jesus
and then
Christ.
shoots his other little daughter, lifts her, and then his dad, it was her father, is standing in the doorway. He shoots it at the father, hits the door frame. The father runs out, goes down to get the sheriff. He grabs his, dying daughter in his arms and walks out to the, he ties his belt around the trigger, puts the gun in his mouth, and to shoot himself, blows his cheek out and a piece of his jaw out, picks up his little daughter, goes out into the barn, and passes out in the barn. And the sheriffs come and they get him, and they drag him in. He's dead drunk. His face is messed up.
I love Europe.
They take him to the hospital. They show him, the story. It says absinthe murder, and they're telling him what he did. And he's like, "I couldn't do this. I loved my wife. I loved my daughter. I would never do that." But he did.
Guess what did?
And so, so absinthe was banned in Switzerland.
Why did absinthe get pinned when he drank everything else under the sun as well?
Because absinthe,
everything else.
Have you been
absinthe
drunk
murder.
on absinthe before?
Yeah, of course.
Thoroughly drunk?
Yeah.
I was once, and it absolutely. Being drunk on it was fun as shit. The hangover was
It's a
one
bad
of the
day.
worst hangovers.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of hangovers.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the worst.
There should
I
be a
distinctly
metric
remember that
system for hangovers.
How miserable. Do you get? Is that commonplace with?
No,
absinthe?
because usually the thing about absinthe is I find myself getting tipsy earlier on. So if it takes 3 or 4 glasses of rum to get me drunk, I might get me tipsy. And then once you're tipsy, you're walking this sort of tightrope between this sobering up and having this walking hangover, or getting, a little too drunk and being an asshole, right? And so you want to walk this tightrope. And I find that when I'm drunk on absinthe, I tend to get that nice buzz going after just a drink or one glass, but I'm not getting that that heavy drunk. So instead of walking a tightrope, I've got this nice 2 or 3
You're walking
glass.
a bridge.
I'm walking
Yeah.
a bridge. It's nice.
Maybe a
little bit
footbridge.
more room.
Maybe a
a little bit more room
footbridge.
for some Michael Jackson stepping
Yeah.
on that bridge.
I had a buddy who got lit up. Fellow musician went over on tour to Europe. Got lit up one night on that, and his eyes were black. He had black eyes the next day for some, I don't know if it was a
You mean his
allergic
pupils
reaction to
were-
The pupils were black?
No, it, like he'd been punched in the eyes.
Well, he probably got drunk and got
Nobody
punched in
did
the eye.
punch him in the eyes.
Well, they probably did.
He just no.
If he's one of your bandmates, he probably got punched in the eye.
It was
Vegas.
If it was one of mine, I would understand. But this is a peaceable band.
This is a nice hippie band preaching love and happiness.
A ska, one of those friendly ska bands.
Nice.
You know, that's fascinating shit. That's a horrible story.
Yes, it is a horrible story. That was Gene Lawnfrey. So that started. That was in 1906, and then the founder of William Wiley.
Now, how did that translate into? So that's when it became illegal in the United States because of that story in Europe.
No, that was just one of the. So what?
I'm
happened
assuming that it wasn't that prominent in the States.
No. So
back then.
what happened? Well, it was. It was, and alcohol was. What happened was, in 1884, I think it was 83.
Yeah.
An American entrepreneur brought a bunch of grape starts over to France. He was going to breed French grapes with American grapes. Well, the American grapes have these thicker roots on them. The root wall was thicker, and so when he brought them over, he had the phylloxera mites were living on them, and when they got into the soil there, they branched out and got into the French grape roots as well.
Gotcha.
Well, the French grape roots were much more delicate and much more thin-walled, and so they withered, and so the whole area withered and died very, very quickly. And by 10 years later, you couldn't buy table wine in France. There was just no wine. It had decimated the whole grape industry.
Right.
And that lasted for about 40 years until finally the French agreed to they started bringing in American grapes and bringing American grapes into France and the Swiss. Yeah. So during that time, of course, you want to have something to drink. Absinthe is very flavorful. Unlike vodka, which has no flavor, it's distilled to a flavorless.
Sure.
And remember, there's nothing to mix it with. There's no Coke guns. There's no soda guns.
Didn't they have some pamplemousse juice of some sort?
Well, how long is juice going to last without ice?
There's tons of moose.
Yeah,
in Europe.
the ice machine wasn't invented till later, so they had ice, but it wasn't common like now, and it wasn't as easy to get as now.
Right.
And so
You had to go hit up one
Moose
of those
everywhere.
monasteries.
Yeah.
For some wine.
Where the moose are.
Yeah.
So, no wine. You could get beer, but
Beer, wine.
no wine. I just told you there's no wine because of the phylloxera.
He did
Have
just
you
tell
not
you
paid
that.
attention to this? You
I
need to
just-
listen to this podcast.
You have too many
These
syllables
pod-
per word.
Yeah.
We have a threshold here at DisArmed at the Armory Club.
And you've gotten a little bit too hot off the picture. Yeah. You fried the board.
You need to listen to this podcast and learn all about the phylloxera mite.
The funny thing is, I've heard this story probably a dozen times, and every time it's like brand new.
It's a fascinating story.
It is.
You'd be a funny dumb guy.
I am a funny dumb guy.
What is a funny dumb guy?
I don't know. Using a lot of syllables, but they don't make sense.
Like Charlie Sheen.
Charlie
Yes.
Sheen is a funny
Yeah.
dumb guy.
Fuck yeah. He might be the funniest dumb guy ever.
He
Yeah?
was.
Oh yeah,
kind of-
because it was a.
I hung out with him one
Captain
afternoon in
Unless that
L.A. and he's not dumb.
He's not dumb at
really
all.
smart.
Right.
But he had this wonderful turn of phrase. The way that he used the English language was just really delightful because he would pepper his vulgarities and his bizarre introspections and extrospections with just the most wonderful vocabulary words.
Exoskeleton inspections.
I could spend hours, maybe days, watching when he was whatever the fuck was going on with him for a bit there.
Coming
Yeah.
out of that launch
With
that he had.
anything that came out that was video on some kind of film of
Yeah.
some sort, which
Yeah,
I believe
yeah.
there still was possibly the hint of film back then.
Yes.
Largely digital. And Ozzy Osbourne. Between those two guys, Ozzy Osbourne in his more recent years, fascinating shit.
Ozzy's pretty
and very different people,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
He was just talking about their relationship with him. I forget. Have you met him?
Yeah.
Charlie?
Yeah, I met him and I met his brother Emilio.
Oh, it was Jay Leno. I was listening to a podcast with your dude Joe,
Yeah.
and he was talking about how I guess him and Charlie are good friends.
I'm
So
not
when he
good
would
friends.
have-
I met him one afternoon in L.A.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing when he was on the show,
Yeah.
going through his shit. You know, they have a personal relationship. So
Yeah.
It's a little bit different. You still have to ask the same questions and whatnot.
Yeah. But he was interesting. He was a really, really interesting guy. I would have loved to have hung out with him more.
Yeah.
I want to fast forward.
Let's fast
to
forward.
the contemporary times.
Contemporary Price.
And there's so many stories nestled and nested.
Yeah, we need to do a round two.
I know.
don't wanna squish everything,
it's a gold
because
mine.
we haven't talked about.
It's a gold mine. We haven't talked about the Great Stone
kinds of
Theater.
Oh my
we
God.
haven't talked about there's multiple
Exotic erotic.
Wow, that was
exotic
25 years of my
erotic.
life. That was
I know.
awesome. I
That's
loved exotic erotic.
Yeah.
and that's not
I
stuff
had
you can just
amazing
kind of
times.
like
Try me.
Exotic erotic for
let's not
dummies.
talk about talking about it. Let's talk about it. Let's do exotic erotic for dummies.
I'm gonna need a glass of wine before we do exotic erotic
Oh
for
my
dummies.
God.
Yeah.
What time is it? How long is this?
Oh, what do you
thing?
That's what I'm
got?
saying.
What do you got? A birthday party to get to?
No, I want to get some food. I'm hungry.
Yeah. Let's do a second session
Let's do it.
because
Yeah.
we could crushing all that into whatever we got left
Totally.
for listenership.
Well, then let's move on to let's kind of wrap this up. Do you have any sort of events
A
that are
book
coming
that I'd
up?
like to pimp,
why
or
not?
my latest
Why not?
podcast I'd
Why
like
not?
to talk about.
Why not? Pretend you're talking into the void, which you
Well,
are.
for anyone that really is interested in the absinthe that I was talking about, the book that I wrote,
What, when, where?
it's called
www.
it's called The Little Green Book of Absinthe.
Yes,
It's
good
available on Amazon.
Yeah.
There was 3 of us that wrote the book, and it's a recipe book, and then there's a bunch of history and mystery. And I wrote, basically, there's just a series of essays that I wrote about the history of absinthe, and then there's a lot of poetry and
You
lots
hear that,
of
kids?
stuff.
Culturize yourself.
Yeah.
It is a very, very, very deep social and cultural exposition. I've read it myself.
Have you really?
Of course.
I haven't
gave
read
you
it in
one.
years. Did I give you one?
Yeah, I mean, we're going back 10 years now, but of course I have
Yeah,
one.
I haven't read it for years. I haven't read it actually since it got published.
Yeah.
But it was it was really fun doing the research for that, because
I was there for some of that research.
yeah it was good times.
That's what I'm saying. There's so many.
I'm proud of some of the stories in there. There's a great story in there about how absinthe is related to spelunking and how it is that we track underwater rivers.
That I don't know about.
So there was a fire in the Pernod plant in Pontellier, France.
Okay.
And there's a river, the Doubs River runs past the Pontellier plant. And there's a fire, and of course they have, hundreds of thousands of gallons of high test alcohol.
Yeah.
So they kick the spigots open to run the alcohol out through the drains, and it runs out into the river.
Never heard of this.
Right? And so the river, when absinthe gets into water, it turns green, it louches. So the river turns green from the absinthe, this opulescent, pearly white green. So the river's turned green, and the newspapers said that the firemen, as they were fighting the fire to quench their thirst, they would dip their helmets in the river and drink absinthe, right? So about 4 days later, there's this guy who's about 15 miles away on the other side of this mountain, on the other side of this hill, because this is right on the edge of the French Alps, right?
Gotcha.
Swiss Alps.
Yeah.
And
French Alps.
French-Swiss.
Swiss French. Okay.
Yeah, it's on the border between France and Switzerland.
Gotcha.
It's like 5 miles from the border of
Yeah.
Switzerland, right? So there's this guy who's just sitting by a stream, and he goes down to the stream, and he's just bathing in the stream, and all of a sudden he smells absinthe. He's like, wow, why do I smell absinthe? And he starts drinking from the stream, and the stream is magically turned. Imagine you're just bathing in a stream,
I never
and
heard
suddenly
this
it's
before.
yeah. So he goes into the pub that night, and he tells someone this story, and they're like, "You're high, you're drunk, you're crazy,"
Yeah.
and no one believes him. Well, the story kind of gets around a little bit, and so this guy hears the story, and he realizes maybe it's because the Doubs River is connected somehow to this stream, and then he gets this notion that if they could somehow put something in the water, they could track where the water goes, because there's all these underground
It's
rivers,
like a whole
right?
hydrology.
Yes, and so that's how they came up with the idea of, we could put dye in the water and we could track the dye, and then we'd be able to see what river is connected underground, like where the underground rivers flow.
Wow.
Then later they did that with radioisotopes, so they could track it using radiation, and then they could see it underground. But that's how they started doing the mapping of underground
that was the
rivers.
impetus for
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a story that that I was very proud of putting that together. That was nice.
That's funny. I remember breezing over that, but now that I'm like, I'd like to go back and actually look at that.
Yeah, because what happened? So that story I'm particularly proud of, because there were two stories there. The one story was about the guy who was about the fire, right, and the absinthe coming through there, and then there was a separate story about the discovery of this, and I think I'm the first person to put the two stories together. I don't remember exactly how it came to pass, but I was really proud of doing that work and getting that put together. And I think that was the first time that was published. I was very proud and pleased of that.
Well, that's yeah. Can we talk about some Can we talk about the industry? Can we talk about?
Sure.
I mean, can we get into some sort of, just to kind of dovetail and everything this all up into where people might actually have an encounter with Paul Nathan?
You can come to my birthday party next week at the
Are
conservatory.
you throwing that out there publicly?
Semi-publicly, yeah.
Here I am pretending like this is public.
Yeah. Yeah, the 14 people that are going to listen to this, all of whom know us, have already been invited to this party.
Well,
yeah, having a birthday party at my place. There'll be a little show there. I may do something, I may not.
Are you're not doing anything in Seattle, though?
Seattle won't be until February. In February, we'll do the I Hate show. So we just wrapped in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Which is the I Hate Kids.
We did the I Hate Children show, 2 shows a day there of IHC, and then at night I was hosting the Danger Strip show.
Yeah.
So I was doing the I Hate Children show at noon, and I was doing Danger Strip show at midnight. So it was a crazy schedule. Really fun, really fun shows. Fun, divergent sort of program.
You're not bringing any of those, though. There's no dates in the.
So I'm getting kicked out of my house. They're tearing down my building. They're going to develop it.
This is big news too.
And so right now my big focus is just finding the next space, because of course it's not just my house, but it's also the conservatory, which has been this sort of community center for the arts and in particular the adult arts. So arts that involve drinking and revelry. And
we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, revelry, which is so important.
Beautiful umbrella term.
I believe very strongly in the power of celebration. And
these are the reasons we're on this planet.
Are they raising the whole block? Is it one of
They're
those?
going to raise the building. I mean, that's the plan, is to do that. And so, we settled that I've got to be out in the middle of November, which is 9 weeks from now. So I'm looking at other places, and we've identified a few places. We've got bids in on a few places. So hopefully that'll get sorted pretty quickly. When it does, then I can move on to the next thing. The next public shows, like non-corporate, non-trade show things I'm doing, I've got a bunch of like private parties and birthday parties and house parties and corporate events booked. That's my bread and butter as a magician. But the next public show is in Seattle in February, and that'll be Twisted Cabaret and the I Hate Children show.
You've done that before. Sorry if you talked about
No.
Yeah.
No, and in terms of like a running, if someone wanted to possibly, I guess obviously there's Facebook is a big monopoly in this day and age, but what about like a website? What's your contemporary website that? I mean, are you keeping it up to date?
I Hate Children show is most up to date.
It's
IHateChildren.com.
Firemagic.com.
Firemagic.com. I wrote Firemagic.com in Dreamweaver like 20 years ago.
Yacht Rock Bar?
Yeah, that doesn't. It's like if you go there right now, like half of the stuff on there, like the photos don't load, the videos don't load. I need to do that. I need to fix it. The problem is, I've been blessed. I've been truly blessed with a level of success that is such that I stay busy with the projects I like. I mean, I don't, I may not have, the massive success that, I would have envisioned for myself.
Like Elon Musk.
Yeah. I'm not super, but I make a good living doing what I do. I travel around the world. I get the gigs that I find interesting, and and that makes me happy. And I've been really blessed in that up until recently. I haven't. I haven't needed the website to get those. I've gotten them because people knew who I was. It's nowadays, every kid in town has a better website than me. And if I was booking me based on websites, I wouldn't book me. I would not book me.
I believe they call that not booking.
Yeah, it would be not booking. So, and it's becoming a problem, and I need to get that fixed.
Well, friends and neighbors,
it's unnamed place.
We're going to continue to negotiate with the friends and neighbors in the local San Francisco Bay Area. But in the meantime, I want to give it up for Mr. Paul Nathan.
Are we ending on that? Let's end on something good.
No,
we end on a joke.
We always end on the most pitiful things. It's kind of our.
Let's end on a joke.
All right, you got a joke?
No, you might. What's your favorite joke? All right, I'll tell a joke. How many children does it take to change a light bulb? Wait, better yet. How many crying children does it take to change a light bulb? Crying. How many crying children? Weeping, sad children does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know, Paul. How many
Apparently more than 3 because my basement is still dark.
That almost reminds me of the one I heard recently, which was, how many Antifa does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know. How many
Nazis, or no, electricity is Nazism, crush all bulbs.
See, you do know a joke. You do know a joke. And on that note, I'd like to thank you for coming to, what is this thing called again?
Yes, this is called DisArmed at the Armory. Thank you so
for
much,
coming
Paul.
to DisArmed at the Armory.
What did I
Armory
say?
Club.
What did I say?
Disarmed the Armory.
DisArmed at the Armory Club.
In which case our show
Whatever.
doesn't exist anymore.
I'd like to thank Aaron Dillashaw and Bo Bonneau for coming down to my show this afternoon and interviewing me and taking me down this walk through memory lane. It's been a lot of fun.
Mutual. And we'll see you.
We'll do a sequel.
We'll see y'all later, folks.
Bye.